what I'm going to give you is a presentation that is not prepared by Meltwater Marketing. You'll be able to tell because the slides are not professionally done. I did it myself in Canva. So some of the animations might not work because I asked our marketing team to help me with this presentation, and they sent me a bunch of stuff that Anthony would present, but I'm not Anthony. Those of you who have met Anthony, he's much smarter than I am. He's in charge of building all of our AI products at Meltwater. I'm nowhere near that level of expertise. I'm just the guy who runs our little data-driven communications research lab. I was proud to hear Lou mention data-driven communications up on stage because what we're trying to do is study what makes Lou Lou. One of the answers is Johnny, but as you can see, they have a very robust system. They have a method of operation, but not everyone does. So when I asked our marketing team, what should I present? They said, here's a bunch of slides. And I said, well, this room already knows all this stuff. There's nothing that I could tell you in that slide deck that could compete with the way that Anthony would do it, that would also tell you something that you haven't heard. So I thought, why don't I do something that only I can do and only Meltwater can do, which is in Q4 last year, we launched our own generative AI solution. Thank you. And what was interesting about that was it was holiday time, right? Q4, the latest toy on the shelves now being launched. And 250 clients bought it. And when I said to the marketing team, I want to do a presentation on what happened to those 250 clients, they said no. And then I said, I just want some data about usage and statistics. They gave me some very aggregated, because they know me. They're like, you cannot be trusted with this information. But then I waited a couple weeks, went and asked somebody else, and I got my hands on all the usage data. 250 different brands bought the latest and greatest technology. What happened? As some of you might know, I lead the deployment of our maturity model, and so I study what makes clients successful and what makes them struggle. And in this case, I really wanted to see, does this make you better? So when Jonna said earlier today that some of you might disagree with what's being set up on stage, I'm the guy she was talking about, I think. But no, I don't think you guys will disagree. I think there's a bunch of Meltwater people here in the room. Watch their glutes clench as I present some of this data. And I say this not to hype it up, but because I just think this is worth talking about, because not everyone is Pepsi. So what does it take to be Pepsi? So you just saw that, but there are people who struggle. And as an industry, as a group, as a community, I think we owe it to our clients to actually make them better, not just sell them a solution. And ironically, somebody said earlier on stage, I forget the phrasing, but it was like, we only talk about something if we have a solution for it. I think, Jeff, you said something similar to that effect. And that is true. We tend to do thought leadership, and we tend to take the industry in a direction where we can sell against it. And so I'm very guilty of this. I've been selling Meltwater for 17 years. I started back in 2009. And now I can afford a mortgage in California and a stay-at-home wife and 2 kids. Not bragging, but I've been successful. And then I look at all my clients and I think, are they equally successful? Are they predictably successful? Not everyone is as awesome as Lou. But I figured everybody wants to be, so what we're doing is figuring out what it takes. So without further ado, I'm going to start with the slides. I'm going to whiz through them, but enjoy it, because this might be the last time that I'm doing a presentation for Meltwater. Okay, let's straighten one thing out first. Brand is what you say about you, okay? But reputation is then what your audience believes about you. And we don't often talk about the distinction between those two things because we spend so much time measuring our brand. Almost everything that I've heard today is how you can measure how your brand shows up in LLMs. Very important, definitely not going to say don't do that. But what's really important is what people believe about you, because that's what drives behavior. And the business doesn't want LLM visibility. The business wants the right kind of behavior. You will not get predictable. Oh, look, the animations are working. You will not get predictable business outcomes if your brand and your reputation are not aligned. If what you're saying is not what people believe, then you'll get a different outcome than what you're expecting. So I want to straighten that out first. Again, you all know this, but when we speak to clients, we don't often highlight that. We often highlight solutions that measure their brand visibility. We don't really talk about driving business outcomes. In fact, and I think this is true, I said this at lunch, not once have I heard anyone measure the IEF so far today, right? Integrated Evaluation Framework, has anybody mentioned it? And I'm not criticizing. Has it come up? I don't think so.
It's so near and dear to my heart, I can't imagine that.
Has it? Again, not criticizing, but reminding that the whole point of the IEF is to use data to drive outcomes. But we're so busy collecting data. All right, so now that we've factored that in, LLMs operate very differently than other things that we've measured in the past. Because brand is what you say about you, reputation is what other people believe. LLMs take the two and they put it into a blender and they serve the smoothie to your clients. Analogy number one, there's gonna be a lot more. So they take press releases, stuff from your website, all this stuff that you're structuring in a way that it will understand what you want it to understand, but then it also takes all the social stuff. It takes also the reputation stuff. And so then when it answers a question, it blends the two together. And the person who's reading the response sometimes can't tell the difference. That's different. I don't think we've ever had that problem before, not to this extent. This slide, Meltwater people are very proud of, and I'm not putting this up here as a flex or a humble brag, but it was only recently that I looked at this slide from the client perspective, right? We, as salespeople at Meltwater, often put this up and think that's our competitive advantage. We have more data than anybody else. And then I look at it from the client's perspective and think, shit, I now have to manage my brand on every single one of these channels. Think about how Pepsi shows up in Youku versus comment sections versus Bloomberg versus TikTok. That's a very different presence, different messaging, different audiences. And now you've got LLMs, which is the row at the bottom that we're very proud of, and all these LLMs actually have different personalities. It's almost like, and you all know this, but they have different reading lists, different news diets. And so you ask them the same question, you're going to get different answers. And that's why you need a tool to be able to manage how you show up in these places. So this, to me, is a very scary slide. This is where your tech stack starts to feel like a Jenga tower. Because every time we're adding another capability on without a strategy, then it's a little wobbly. But there's a way you can cheat with Jenga, which is you're not taking out one tile and putting it on top. If you have a strategy, you can just add tiles without taking any others out. Because the lack of a strategy is what makes the whole thing wobbly. And we've all seen clients who do that. They add capability on top of capability, and then what happens? They get questioned why they have such a huge spend on their tech stack, and what are we getting for all this? And are they connected to business outcomes? No. New chief comms officer, or a new head of the department, or just a new tool, and they just switch agencies. And nobody likes that, especially in this room, right? We just get kicked out because we're not connecting to business outcomes. And then I've heard this a few times today. This one really made me laugh. I'll give you a second just to read it, but every decade, every technological disruption, we keep hoping for the next thing. I mean, Jeffrey, you talked about it that once things become agentic, it'll be easier once we connect it to MCP, and it will. But by the time that happens, was it Jonathan who was talking about the scary stuff about what's happening with MissDis? Well, MissDis is going to get better at what it does. So the cavalry's not coming. We've got to figure this out now. There's no use waiting for the technology to get better. We have to get better, like my clicker. Okay, so there's a couple stats that I think are worth reiterating. Salesforce and eMarketer did a study. They asked a bunch of people if they trust AI recommendations. 46% of people in May said, yes, they trust recommendations. So back then we were skeptical. Then they ran the study again in November. And of course, 86% of people trusted the answer when they asked ChatGPT, should I buy a Tesla Model Y or a Model 3 or whatever question that they were asking. But for me, there's a third statistic that's the most telling of all. There's a canary in the coal mine at my dinner table. Every Sunday, my in-laws come over for dinner. And During the course of, from May to November, my mother-in-law asked me so many questions about AI. And I'm sure you've all been in the same situation. She's 70-something years old. She's like, you work in AI, what is it? What does it do? How does this work? Wait, so it can do this? And I was like, Grandma, we call her Grandma, stop asking me. Like, just start using it, right? Anything that you want to Google, go to ChatGPT instead. If you want to ask me the question, ask ChatGPT. So she did. And then what happened? She did stop asking. She did. Then what happened? What happened January 3rd? No. January 3rd, for those of you that still read the news, Maduro was ousted, right? Extracted, kidnapped, whatever you want to call it. She was having a conversation with someone from Venezuela, a very close friend, and she was having a heated political debate. And she was defending her argument with ChatGPT. That, to me, was the moment. It was like, oh, okay, the customer journey has changed. When a 70-something-year-old lady who didn't know what AI was is now so empowered by the answers that it provides that she's willing to argue with a Venezuelan about who's buying oil from Venezuela. Woohoo! So that means now that brands have to manage their reputation across 5 different channels. So yes, LLMs, you have to track them, but it's still a reality that how you show up in the news is important, how you show up in social, and there's different types of social media. There's user-generated content, there's your owned content, there's your earned and paid and all that sort of stuff. Search data is still important, I'm sorry to say, but Google Trends is still free, and it's still helpful. What percentage of Google searches finish in 0-click? 60%. When AI overviews are turned on, what percentage of Google search results result in 0-click? 83. Yeah. So now, even Google is serving up answers to your customers. So we have to monitor search, not just for that reason, but it's still a sign of intent. If I'm curious about something, you don't want to know how many times I Googled MCP and RAG in the last 12 months, and I still Googled it today when somebody mentioned it because I needed a reminder. But then there's also surveys, primary research, right? You still need to ask your audience because at the end of the day, it's their perception and their belief that's very important. But LLMs present a huge opportunity, not just a risk. LLMs blend the two. You can ask it any question, and you can get answers much more quickly. But again, they're just 1/5 of the equation as far as I'm concerned. You should have a strategy that taps into all of these. Because if you don't, then you just have a blind spot. Because remember, my mother-in-law, she spends a lot of money. And if she's getting answers from LLMs, it could be influenced by the answers that is being provided. Now, Lou is firmly in the 18%. Those 250 clients I wanted to tell you about, okay, watch Meltwater people squirm right now. This is what we found. I looked at all the data and figured out what their usage patterns were. So there were 18% of people that clearly did something different. And what they did was very simple. So this isn't going to make your jaw drop. Probably get some phones out and take screenshots, go for it, but none of it will be a revelation. Those clients who used our tool, who went in and set up folders, they were very different. Folders, why? Because you have hundreds of prompts. So everything that Johnny and Lou were describing, and this is kind of technical if you're not a Meltwater user of our generative AI Lens product called Gale, then maybe you're like, I don't know, I didn't even know the other tools that exist if they operate with folders, to be honest. But ours, this indicated that those clients used it much more heavily and got much more value out of it. Why? Because they actually organized it. How organized did Johnny and Lou seem, right? They're very well thought out. So number one, this is what they did. And again, this is a lagging indicator. I'm not saying a leading indicator. Another one is that they had much more unbranded category searches. And again, we're talking about prompt engineering and context engineering. They're not just searching for what does the average consumer think about Pepsi. It's what does the average consumer think about fizzy drinks or sports hydration, unbranded. Let's just see how this shows up in the category. So that's one key difference. Not everyone does the unbranded stuff. Almost everyone starts with the vain stuff. Think about in the early days of media monitoring, what was the first search you type in? Your company name. We're so vain that that's what we want to see first. But then you start looking at competitors in industry terms. Same thing. That's a sign of maturity here, unbranded category searches. And then the third one is a weekly cadence. I think Lou had specifically called this one out. Every week there are meetings, and then there are key people in those meetings. This is like somebody who takes out a gym subscription and actually goes at a regular pattern, right? Now, this is it. 35% of customers that bought this solution never set it up. Never set it up. Is that our fault? Maybe. I doubt it. You all know how much we love to make phone calls. They absolutely got email reminders and pings and notifications and phone calls, and we had our standard weekly calls and all that sort of stuff. So how could 1 in 3 clients not even set it up? I'll tell you a story, because that's human nature. How am I doing on time? 2 minutes? Oh, Jonna, come on. Okay, this is going to be a good story. Maybe it'll burn the whole 2 minutes, but there's only one more slide after this, I think. My wife has MS, multiple sclerosis. It's under control. She's doing great because she has a great medicine. And the side effect of the medicine is hair loss. So, of course, another medicine, supplement, that helps her with that. She and I are walking through Costco, and we are shopping for a bunch of supplies for Thanksgiving. We've got mother-in-law coming over, and we're focused on that. But we walk through the aisles, and she sees a filtered water shower head, $180. She's like, we need that. What do we need that for? I love spending money at Costco, but this was one of those husband-wife situations. We don't need that. She's like, no, it's really good. I was told that it helps with hair loss. Okay, you got it. Bought it, took it home, went on with our holidays. Ask me today where that shower head is. My wife still has MS. She still has the side effects. It's in my garage. I haven't installed it. I haven't taken it out of the box. I'm one of those 35%. And I consider myself an early adopter, and I'm very mature. Why did I not install it? I get it, Jonna. Okay, 1 minute, fine. It's human nature. I got sidetracked with the holidays and all this other stuff. So 35% of those 250 customers, they were doing other things. They were deploying dashboards and reputation frameworks and all this sort of other stuff. This just fell to the wayside, but also for one other reason. They didn't know what to do with it. They haven't got a strategy. I realized, oh shit, I have to install this thing. I've installed shower heads before, but this one needed a special tool and blah, 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 so I just fell down at the first step. But there's another stage. The people that got over that hump, there was 47% that just did ad hoc prompts. No strategy, no folders, just went in, typed branded searches, and then never really went beyond that. Again, because they didn't really have a strategy. But then there were 13% that have a regular cadence, and they started to introduce unbranded monitoring. And then there are the 5%, the strategic. I would say clearly Pepsi operates at the top level. So why am I showing you this? I think we together, my call to action is who wants to join us in banding together to educate the industry on how to deploy this the right way. How can we create more case studies like, Lou is special, and I don't mean to keep calling him out, but we would all love to have more Lou's in the world, right? So we can do that. Here is a playbook, nothing you haven't seen before. I just want to say thank you and say this is the Tom Cruise moment where I'm holding a goldfish and saying, who's with me? Any members of AMEC that are interested in teaming up in research, studies, podcasts, any educational enablement material, because I think that's what the industry needs. We don't need another tool. They're great. We need strategies. Thank you.